Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Dixon. I'm a massage therapist and a postural alignment therapist on Nantucket Island. I have been working with people with chronic pain for the last 20 years as a massage therapist. And due to people's needs changing, in order to get to the root cause of their issues when they came to me for massage, I actually had to progress into postural alignment, which is really like being a personal trainer for your posture. And this is what became the main issue that people had when they were coming to me with pain. Now, massage was still great. It still felt good. It was still really helpful for people, but it didn't correct the main issue that people had. Now, in the 20 years of my massage career, or more than 20 years, two things that really changed significantly with people was first and foremost their uses of devices. So computers, cell phones, having different, Kindles and things like this. Everyone started using these devices regularly. And when they were at work using these devices, they ended up sitting a lot more. So we always have been a society that sat for a really long time. And, but significantly, things changed where we started sitting and not getting up and moving around quite so much. Additionally, people's jobs became a little bit more repetitive. So people became more specialized in what they did, and they ended up repeating the same movements a lot. Now, our bodies are meant to be able to sit. Our bodies are meant to be able to have repetitive movements, but we are meant to make sure that we're introducing full range of motion and movement into our day. So today's class is on walking. And it's going to be a two-part class. It's going to be this week and next week. And we're going to work on different elements of walking. And walking is far more complicated. It's something that we all do from the time we're about one, but it's actually got many more integral parts than what I'm getting to in the next two sessions. But what I will get to in the next two sessions will be able to clear up a lot of we'll really be able to clear up a lot of the issues that you might be having with any of this. But first and foremost, this class is primarily for informational purposes only. If any of the exercises don't feel like they're either comfortable for you, then stop and or go see a doctor. If you aren't sure whether something is appropriate for you, please stop and see a doctor. You're also welcome to email me or to text me. My information should be on the document that would have been emailed today. All of the exercises that I've listed, in addition to showing you them and demonstrating them in today's class, which is recorded and will be available online, is that they're all pretty much have links according that you can click on that sort of break down each one individually. Now, today's class was partially a mixture of different foot classes and hip classes and things that I've done in the past with Egoscue exercises. And Egoscue is where I got my postural alignment education. And it's also a mixture of some of Katie Bowman and a woman named Jill came up with a walking class, which costs about $99. It's on Tune Up Fitness. So this is a partial element of that. Should you be really interested in taking the course at $99, it's really an excellent course that breaks down many different things. For the older person, though, they do spend a lot of time working on elements that might not be absolutely ideal for you. And a lot of my group that I have at the Atheneum is on the older side. Sorry, I got something in my eye. So I'm going to be adapting the class a little bit for you. So what seems so strange is that walking is something we do from the time that we were one, but there are so many elements of our body that move together, and we do it thousands of times a day. So in the perfect world, we want to have appropriate posture and appropriate movement. So to start with, let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I'm talking about posture. So by posture, in and itself, is going to be how we stack up our body, okay? And no one is going to be absolutely perfect, or very few people, because everyone has either limitations in their movement or activities that you've done, or you always carried a child on one hip and groceries in the others, and or we had an injury in this hip and then we always had to favor some knee. So everyone's posture is going to tell the story of all the movements you've had your entire life. But when things are not stacked properly, pain tends to come, pain or injury. And we want to avoid pain and injury. So in the ideal world, when I talk about posture, I'm talking about how everything is stacked. So we're going to stack in 3 different planes. We're going to stack on top of each other. So when I say on top of each other, our joints are meant to be load bearing. So we're supposed to have like our ankles over our hips, over our shoulders, and with our head aligned. Then we want to see, do most of our points, are our feet out? Which direction do our knees point? Which directions do our hip point? And are we rotated? So we're going to look at, are we generally facing forward? And then we want to look at, sort of, are we leaning forward or are we leaning back? So when we think about posture, we're thinking about how our body is stacked, but then walking is an element of movement. So we have the posture that we have, and we're adding repetition and movement into it. So it's easier to deal with posture. It is harder to change a movement of pattern of movement that we've had since we were 1. So these are all little pieces that we're going to change over time. They're going to make a really big difference. So as I mentioned before, this will be a 2-part class. Today, I'm going to talk about the different joints that we use when we walk, where you might see the issues with them, and how we might deal with the different joints along the way. I'm going to look at different exercises to help support it, different mobility exercises to increase mobility if you're limited in mobility in any of these joints. And again, not everyone has joints that move appropriately. So if you have a lot of arthritis, or to increase the range of motion at a joint is painful, please don't. If it's just stretching, that's okay. If it causes pain, then we can find an accommodation to make it appropriate for you. We're going to go over different ways of releasing tissue, like with foam rollers or using balls and things like that. We're going to go over stability exercises. And then in the next class, we're going to go over putting it all together and adding challenges into it. Because the challenges into it are going to be an element of balance and sort of practicality. It's one thing to walk appropriately in your house, but we want you to be able to go on the cobblestones, or we want you to be able to go on a walk on the moors and not injure yourself. Okay, so that's going to take an element where the ground becomes a little bit uneven, and we want to sort of stabilize our muscles and our feet to be able to handle a change of a walking surface. So a lot of people are a little bit surprised about the different joints that we use when we walk. So who can think about and maybe list a couple of the joints that we probably use when we are walking? I'm gonna make it a little interactive today. Anyone want to unmute themselves and list some?
Our hips, our knees,
ankle.
Yep. Okay.
Lower back too.
Yep. Particularly your sacrum, because your sacrum and your hip has this relationship to each other. And you do use your your back. But what's interesting about your back is your lower back is often used. It's not supposed to be used as often as it is, because a lot of times our joints have a different purpose, and it's meant to be either stability or mobility. And a lot of times we use a joint not for its main purpose. A lot of times we will, because our hips aren't as mobile as they should be, we will use our low back, and our low back, lumbar back, is meant to be stable versus mobile, and our hips and our sacrum is meant to be mobile. So a lot of times we will dominantly use our back when walking instead of using a few other muscles that we're meant to do. A joint that a lot of people don't recognize that's very, very important in walking is actually your big toe. And your shoulders. Actually, your shoulders are incredibly important at balancing your movement and sort of balancing where your weight is. And so a lot of people don't realize that your shoulders are really important with gait as well, and your big toe. But your big toe is probably even more important than your shoulders, because your big toe determines how big a stride that you should have. So let me bring this a little closer so I can show you. Every joint has a range of motion. So let me see if you can see. Let me go like this. Okay. So one thing with your toes, okay, is that you need to be able to lift your toes up, okay? And this is going to be dorsiflexion of the big toe. And you have to be able to push the toe down. So right here, I'm taking and I'm pressing my big toes down into the ground. But in gait, it's going to look a little bit more like this, where I am in a walking stance and I have to be able to bend my toes. So in order to do this one, my joint has to have the ability to be able to have the space to make the movement. For this one, my muscles have to be strong enough to be able to have a contraction and pull them up. Ankles, so we need to have enough mobility into the big toe. When it comes to our ankles, right, that our ankles also have to be able to dorsiflex, which is bring our foot up, okay? And you see this in the ability to be able to bring this leg forward, our feet comes up, we're stimulating the front line, okay? But then when we're progressing into our standing leg, we have to come over and we have to be able to push off. So our ankles have an ability to one dorsiflex and plantar flex. Our knees, we do use them, but our knees are meant to be stable between our mobile ankle and our mobile hip. So what ends up being a problem for the knees are, how are knees stacked? You know, if our ankles aren't as mobile as they should be, and our hips aren't as mobile as they should be, and your hips are also meant to be stable, okay? Our knees are either going to track in, or they're going to track out, or they may waver a little bit like this, okay? And then we're going to be using the knee in a way that it's not meant to be, and we're likely to injure it, okay? When it comes to the hips, it's very common that our hips are a little bit, the joint is a little bit not as mobile, but also it's meant to be strong, okay? So there is an element into our hips, that when we spend time in a single leg stance, we have our low back, yes, shifting and holding us up, but we have the ability to stay here. It's very common to see people need to shift to the side or squiggle in some way to be able to have the hips, because the hip isn't really strong enough to hold you level to be able to go forward. Yes, okay, and then shoulders. People don't think about their shoulders, but the shoulders make a biggest difference. When I am watching someone walk, and this will be I'm driving by and They are on the bike path, and I can recognize people according to how they walk because I've watched them a bunch of times. But you will often see their walking dysfunctions because of what I see in their arms. So even when I have a client that is coming and they're talking about a particular pain, I will often have them walk because I want to see what they do when they move. And it will give me a clue as to where the issue is. And you will see the different dysfunctions in the upper body because your upper body is going to mimic, you know, that I will see. So really common is for me to see something like this when they're walking, and I'm exaggerating it, but the example is that once you start to see these patterns, you will see them all over the place. But when we have an element of our legs shifting forward and back, our arms counter do the weight typically. And so that's why you see a difference with the shoulder. It's not as important as the big toe. Big toe is actually probably more important. If you have limited mobility in the big toe, it is going to be a bigger issue. So, any questions before I get started with what I'm going to do is go through many of the different joints and show you all the different elements that we could address at each of them. So I'll go over release with either balls or foam rollers. I'm going to go over the different exercises, and the exercises will often overlap which joint they're helpful for, but we're going to go over the stability exercises for them, other things that make a difference with them, and then in the next class, we're going to put it together and try to answer any questions that you might have had after this first week and start adding balance and different weight elements into it. I also hadn't mentioned it, but position of the eyes is also important with walking. Any questions before I get started with the big toe?
Yes, I do have a question. I'm Roxanne.
Yes. Hi, Roxanne.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm so glad I took the class because I'm having a little problem on my hip and my knee. And so do you have printout of the motion you're going to be teaching us or the move you're going to be teaching us? Is there a printout that I can look at when I go out there?
Yep. So there would have been, did you sign up just today?
Sign up today and next Monday.
Okay. Well, if you look somewhere this morning, we had the printout for today's class. Okay.
Oh, was it sent to an email? Or?
Yes, it was sent to an email. Okay. So if you want to, it's what they have is links to all the exercises. So if I were you, I would watch today.
Oh, okay.
Then I would print it off. And if you have questions, I sent it as a Word document so that you can more easily just click on it and see the videos. If you're like, oh gosh, I knew that one was important to me. They have the whole exercise sort of printed off. Okay.
So Amy would have sent us a printout of what the class?
I think you were on the list as well. Okay.
Okay.
So if you
all right.
sent it just about 8:20 or 8:25. So.
Oh, okay. And
okay.
I can trust the link to know what we're supposed. I mean, we trust you or we trust the link that you're sending us about other people.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So hips are all supposed to be stacked and showing forward. Okay. But with our big toe. So one of the things with our big toes are we want to see if our toes are in general pointing forwards or pointing out, okay? If they're pointing out, it's not really a big toe issue. It's going to be a hip and or knee issue and or a low back issue. But in general, okay, we want to try to have our joints relatively moving forward. So we want to see that our toes are pointing forwards, our hips are both pointing forwards, our shoulders are pointing forward, okay? And again, you can see I am a little knock-kneed. This is also going to mean that I need to stabilize at my hip a little bit more, okay? But when we look at big toe, okay, to be able to take a nice big stride, we have to be able to have the space we look at my back leg to be able to have that big toe come up, okay? If we have arthritis into that joint, and it's not uncommon to have that, and you cannot fully extend this toe, you are probably going to have to shorten your stride, okay? So that means you can still walk, you can still do fast, okay, but you do need to be able to push off. Now, when you have this swing leg, okay, you have to be able to pull that toe up, and that's going to be using muscles to be able to do that. When you do that, okay, a lot of people aren't quite strong enough in those muscles, but not only that, the tissue on the bottom of the feet is starting to tense up and get ready to take the load of the ground, okay? It's a really important element that's far more complicated than I'm probably going to get into in today's class. But one of the things that you can do is just to recognize how well your toe works, okay? So one of the things that we could do is, we come right here, okay? Is just, and you can do this when you're sitting, is just to look at how well can I lift my toes? How well can I press my toes back? And we've done a lot of classes where we talk about the foot and the issues that we might have with the foot. And then we're going to want to look at, doesn't do as well on this. Let's come back here. We want to look at, can we lift up just our big toe and press our big toe down and lift our little guys and press my, and you will see that it's going to be changing the angle of these bones. So you'll see like I'm going to pronate a little bit and supinate, but we want to be able to see like that we can spread our toes apart like this and place them down. It makes for a really wide toe box. We want to see if we can lift our toes up. We want to see if we can press our toes down, and we want to see if we can move them separately, okay? Then, so that is about the muscles, but sometimes our muscles don't work well, and sometimes it's that the joint has limitations. So if you're wondering, if you are someone that has issues, okay, the joint would be right here, okay, as opposed to just the knuckle. But we can see if you can move the joint or not, okay? So if you're like, oh, my joint can move really, really well, but I have a really hard time lifting my toes up, then it's mostly the muscles. If you have trouble lifting the toes up and you find that that joint doesn't move at all, then you're going to have a problem into the joint. You can certainly try increasing mobility at the joint, and I'll show you how you can do that. But if it causes too much pain, maybe follow up with a doctor, have an x-ray, look and see if you have bone spurs or some type of arthritis into there. For the most part, unless it causes a tremendous amount of pain, it's good to gently increase mobility at that joint because it's a very important joint to work on. So how can you increase mobility at that joint? Well, I'm going to take a little block here. I'm going to see if this shows well enough. So I'm going to come right here, okay? And I am going to place my toe here, and then I'm going to increase the pressure. And so this is going to work a bit on getting this toe to be able to bend, okay? Some people like to use balls instead. So if we were going to use a ball instead, okay, I might come right here, and yeah, that one's not going to show as much. Let's try this. There we go. So it's like against the wall. I'm going to set up the ball right at the bottom of the toe, and I'm going to get, can you see how I'm able to sort of get a little bit more mobility into that joint, okay? Now, another way that you could do it is you could simply play with it. So we would want to kind of stretch it this way, and we would want to stretch it this way. Now, sometimes you might just have tendons that are a little bit short at the top of the foot. Really, really common an issue because our shoes, the shoes that we wear in today's world, make us want to have our toes lifted up a little bit and our foot lifted up a little bit. So what happens is the tissue here is tight, but not working all the time. And the tendons on the top are very short. So one way that we can work on it is to stretch our toes back. Now, my weight is going to be in my left leg, and I'm going to be stretching the right, okay? And feel free to have something that you could hold on to, but I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to stretch my toes. Now, my weight is not in my back foot, okay? All I am doing is carefully allowing the top to stretch. Now, what's very, very common and is happening to me right now is a cramp in the bottom of my foot. Now, that cramp is happening because my foot is almost always stretched all the time in shoes. And when I go to unstretch it by stretching the top, it doesn't quite know what to do. So it reacts by cramping, which is sort of coming back to life and adding movement into that area. And if it gets uncomfortable, you can just step out of it. But it's not a concern, but feel free to come out of it. And that's going to stretch. Now, if you have hammer toes, okay? Hammer toes are an element of our toes spend too much time up like this to keep us from falling back. And then to keep from falling forward, our toes cramp down like this, okay? So if you have hammer toes, okay, this exercise is imperative to you, okay? If you have plantar fasciitis, that is imperative because most likely your tissue has been overstretched and underused for a really long time, okay? So different ways of also, so the big toe has primarily two issues. The joint doesn't move appropriately, and you can assess whether it's moving, and then you can use balls, you can use blocks, you can go up against a wall, you know? I can go up against a wall and stretch that as well. And then we want to make sure that our toes can lift, press down, and spread apart. And this takes time because a lot of times we have never used our toe muscles. And there's lots of different classes where I talk about elements of it. But one thing that can be helpful is to make our hands do it at the same time, okay? And you can even touch them. So in other words, I'm here and I'm going to try to do this at the same time. It can be a little bit easier, okay? Because my brain is able to make connection with my toes that way. Any questions about toes and the big toe joint especially before we move on to ankles? Yes.
I have a bunion and my toe, my big toe on one foot is curved. So I have that stability.
Yes. Okay. So a bunion is primarily going to be caused from, it's going to have been caused from a hip that wasn't working as properly as it should on one side, and then an adjustment into the foot where we were walking differently, okay? So there's an element that causes the actual bunion, though, is going to be an element where we did this too much, but we're not moving. So in other words, we moved our body more like this, and we had a lot of weight that pressed off like this, as opposed to in gait, we're supposed to press off like this, which is straight, okay? So bunions can be improved until they hit a certain place, because a bunion starts with inflammation in the joint, and the joint gets sort of swollen, but then it gets kind of rock hard. And once it gets rock hard, there's a certain element where the toe goes like this way, and it's almost too late, okay, without surgery. But here's the thing. Even if you had surgery, if you don't change how you're walking, the bunion's going to come right back, Okay, surgery does not correct it, it just allows it to be better aligned. So sometimes what I hadn't talked about, and this is in foot classes, I believe, is that sometimes you need to make sure that your toes are able to be in alignment, okay? So if you had a bunion, okay? If you had a bunion and your toe was going that way, okay? You would want to have a bunion spacer that's going to allow that toe to be straight, okay? Now, it's going to make for a wider toe box because you'll have had a buildup of material here, okay? And then you have the toe that goes that way, and you're gonna put a spacer to make sure it's aligned. Because in order to really be able to lift that toe up, you do need to be able to have access to this line. It's a tendon, okay? And someone with a bunion is gonna have a really hard time lifting that toe up. And so bunion spacers can make a really big difference. Correct toes can make a difference. Yoga toes can make a difference. Simply coming in here and separating and working some of the different exercises we're going to do will make a difference. But it's a slightly more complicated thing, and you're going to want to look at not just your foot, but your hip as well. Okay, so some of the foot exercises and some of the walking, you might want to walk with something that's going to allow your toe to be in more of a straight alignment with this bone right here than stuck over here, okay?
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Now, I did get a toe spacer that you recommended after one of the other classes, and it does help, but it still is, of course, curved, and you know, my stability is off.
Yeah, so it's going to be, okay? But there's more than one thing that might be causing the stability off. You can send me a picture of like what level it is, like just a picture of your foot, because that'll give me a couple of senses. But it's not uncommon to also have peripheral nerves that aren't working properly on the bottom of the feet. So there's more than one thing. So there's how well do you feel your feet? That's sort of what we're going to get in the next class when we talk about changing balance and things like that. But part of balance and stability is also going to be how well our nerves are working in the bottom of the feet and how strong everything else is. So it's often, I'm taking like the simple answer to things, and some things are slightly more complicated, but you know, if you send me a picture, I'll get a better idea of what's going on with you.
Okay.
And also, just when I look at your foot, I'll probably have a sense of how well your nerves are working as well, compared to that I might want to look at somewhere else in your body. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have the same question. I have a bunion also, but I also have orthotics inside my shoes. So the orthotics are 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old. Maybe it's time for me to get new orthotics to give me a better fitting.
So there's multiple thoughts on orthotics. In the purely doctor route, they will tend to be like, yes, orthotics, okay? Other ones might say, you know what? An orthotic is really meant to have like this right here, your arch appropriate, okay? So someone might be too flat and they might be really arched. I mean, they're gonna be somewhere in between here. But in our gait, okay, we start out with supination and we go over into pronation, and we go into supination and pronation. And the issue when we wear an orthotic, okay, and I'm not saying don't wear the orthotic, is that we get stuck in one position, okay? And in the perfect world, you might not need orthotics because you've built up your arch to be able to work appropriately. So, but
that's what I thought. I was wondering if I really need the orthotics after all those years, you know? Does it?
You might, and you might not, okay? But the reality is with anything, we probably want to make slow change. So what you might want to do is work on building up the muscles, okay? Work on all the different elements of things and ease out of the orthotics some of the time. With anything, we don't want to make 100% of a change all the time because our feet are our basement, right? So a lot of times, even if you aren't used to the orthotics, you kind of want to ease into the orthotics because it's going to change how everything is stacked all the way up. Sometimes the amount of work it takes to correct everything, it's either that we literally don't have the time or we don't want to take time. And so sometimes it's just easier to wear an orthotic or something like that. So everyone's really quite individual, and everything has its good purpose, but also it's sort of a crutch, you know, like, and in the perfect world, our muscles are all going to do all the jobs that they're going to be. But sometimes people have neurological deficits, like they're diabetic or they have neuropathy, and all of these things can be improved, but sometimes they can only be improved so much. So what we really want is for us to be comfortable, stable, moving properly, and enjoying life. Enjoying life is the primary one, okay? So some people are like, get out of the orthotics, do everything. First of all, ease into anything and make sure you're ready for it before you make a change. The second one is really what we have to figure out is how to have the best and most comfortable life possible. Plus, you know, being able to be safe and stable as we age. Okay, that's an important one. Safe and stable as we age. So it might be for different, but it's certainly, you know, I would explore doing the foot exercises as well. Okay, short foot, which isn't listed in this one, but it is in other of my foot classes, would be an important one for you to be able to look at. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I didn't really talk about overall release at the bottom of the foot though. So with this, I have a squishier ball. You can use a harder ball as well, but I'm going to roll this on the ground, okay? But I'm going to roll either by taking the ball and squishing it in, but I'm going to be stepping into it, okay? But all over the bottom of the foot, or I'm going to take lines and try to move it like this. Now, when I'm going to be working to release the tissue, I'm going to go to like slow and deep, okay? And this ball is squishy. It is not hard, see? So it's going to produce not a really strong point, whereas if I use this guy, you can see it doesn't squish at all. This is going to be a much harder point, okay? And then I have a ball, and I'm going to go into the different textures with the next one. I don't know if you can see this one, but it is textured. It's got little bumps on it. And this little bump, okay, this one you would do light and fast and short duration, same as the other one, but this one it was just going to be back and forth. And this one is going to help the peripheral nerves on the bottom of the feet. So people like very possibly Barbara, being able, you said you don't feel stable. One, you have the issue with the bunion, but you also don't feel stable, okay? That might be, for many reasons, your nerves, your peripheral nerves, which are what tell you where you are in space, aren't working quite as well as they should. And it would be very interesting to try balancing and doing the foot exercises, and then spend about 10-20 seconds light and fast with this little bumpy ball, okay? Light and fast with this little bumpy ball, and then go back to trying to balance and see how much better you can do it, okay? Now, it might make a difference. It's going to make a difference, actually, but how much of a difference is really a surprise. I had a client the other day, and she's very strong. She does a lot of the exercises. She actually started in these classes and then came to see me for a couple sessions, and she had improved dramatically, but she was having a little bit more problem balancing then. And we want to balance, right? Balance is what's going to keep us safe. And she was a runner. She wanted to run. So I needed her to be safe on one leg. So then she did a couple seconds of this rubbing on the bottom of the foot and went straight back into the exercises. And the look on her face when she was like 10 times more stable was priceless. I wish I could have like filmed it but she got it then, right? Because she also felt it. So, so one of the things we can do, I sort of showed you the soft squishy balls. We can do, you know, sort of push in like this and back and forth, the light squishy ball. It looks like it's going to be deep, but we're going to do light and fast, and that's to simulate the nerves. And that's what this can look like right here. So this is going to be to help just soften the tissue. So my weight is on my left leg. I'm sort of stepping up, moving the ball underneath me. You can also sort of squish back. So my heel is like in the ground and I'm squishing back and forth. And you can also squish back and forth like this. Okay. And or you could have had the bigger ball, but for many people, particularly if they have, it's going to be too deep for them. If you don't have a lot of tissue in the bottom of the feet, I wouldn't recommend this guy, but very light bumpy ball, light, fast, gonna look just like this. And then you want to go straight into some sort of an exercise where you're balancing, because you want to take into, you want to sort of use the brain's awareness that we just had. So that's the sections that I have on feet. And there's a whole link when you get to the library of previous classes. And I've had 3 or 4 different previous classes just on feet. So if you guys are still more interested in feet, I would go back and look at some of those because they were pretty good. Okay, ankles. So 2 elements that we're supposed to have when it comes to ankle. Oh, it's already 9:15. So you can get a small bumpy ball. I sell them if you're on Nantucket. They're about $8, or the small bumpy ball came from Rock Tape. You could order directly from Rock Tape as well. Well, yeah, Rock Tape. Okay. So you're not moving through this class as fast as I thought. So we might end up having some of this next time as well. Okay. So we have an element of dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Okay. And how this ends up showing up in gait, okay, is dorsiflexion, we lift up when we're bringing our leg forward, okay, but then we go into plantar flexion when we're down on the ground and we're pushing off, okay? So generally we want to look, our ankles and our feet pointing forward. That's generally where we want them to be, as opposed to pointing out this way. And with the bunion, one tends to plant down like this, but instead of pushing off with that big toe, we twist like this. And that's what causes the bunion. So it doesn't look like we're twisting because our body is the one that's twisting like this. But instead of pressing straight off with the big toe, we're creating a lot of friction going like that. So ankle exercises. So if we're having problems, our ankles are meant to be mobile, okay? They might not be as mobile as they should, and you can look at your actual range of motion in them by coming over to, all right, so I'm gonna have my knees bent. This is not more accurate. If I was on the ground, it would be more accurate, okay? But we can come here against this, and we can look at how much we could bring this knee to the wall, okay? When we're in here. And then we can look to see what our range of motion is, and we can compare it to both sides, okay? If they're comparable to both sides, that's fine. Then we want to look at the actual muscles themselves. How well can they dorsiflex or plantar flex? If there's limitations in the joint, I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do, but releasing the tissue can be very helpful. So, a foam roller. we're gonna use a foam roller. I'm going to release the calf, okay? With the foam roller, this is a soft foam roller. It's a melt, but they have many different brands. Okay, I'm gonna work all along the outside of it. You can use different balls, you can do different massagers, okay? I'm also going to release the tissue on the front of the calves, and I would recommend using a softer one, okay, versus a harder one. So I'm sinking in on this one, and I'm just going to release the muscles on the top here. And then you can look to see if you've improved. All right, my favorite calf stretch is a Katie Bowman one. We're going to be talking about this in the next class as well, because it's going to be how you know how long a stride you should take. Okay, but we have a half dome roller. You could use roll towels, you could use other things. Okay.
Hello.
And we're going to.
Hello.
Yes.
You need to silence yourself.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to have my foot on the calf. You can see that my calf is stretched, okay? And I'm going to keep my joints over my ankles, and I'm going to bring this forward, okay? And you can get a sense of how much space you have and what size gait you should have. I'm going to go into more of this one next time, okay? Because today I want to get through more of our exercises. You can use it on both. I'm going to have my toes pointing forwards, okay? And I'm going to get a decent stretch into my calves. It's going to look like this, okay? So as you can see, I'm stretching my calves. So we did the foam roller for a release. Now we're doing an active stretch for the calf, but different exercises that we could do for them, okay? We could use a strap. I'm going to place it over more the ball of my foot than the middle of my arch. And we're going to come right here, okay? And I'm going to, you can see I want to sort of supinate. I'm going to put a little pressure on this one to even me out. And I'm going to work on, I'm not about, the strap is helping me keep level, but I'm going to press and release. Press and release. And it's going to work on dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. One of my very favorite exercises is the ankle point flexes. So we're going to have this leg straight with my leg up. It's going to be, this leg is going to be at a right angle, okay? The movement is not from here, it's not from here, it's at the ankle. We're going to make circles in one direction. We're going to make circles in the other direction. And then we're going to point and flex. And this is going to work, so stabilize every single muscle from the knee down, okay? And then we would do it for the other one. So circles in one direction, circles in the other direction, and pointing and flexing. Only one person in all my years has ever found this to be not tiring. And then there's 3-point toe raises. Feel free to have a chair nearby if you would like, okay? But we are going to stabilize. So when we did the ankle point flexes, we have our foot up, we're using all the muscles, but we aren't weighted, okay? Now we're weighted, we're on the ground, okay? We're gonna have our toes pointed forwards, our toes pointed out, and our toes pointed in. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up on our toes and back down while keeping sort of upright. So this is what this looks like. So we're gonna come up and down, and we start by having our toes pointing forwards. Then we have our toes pointed out. This is not movement at the knees. This is movement at the ankles. And then we have it in. And here's a clue. The ones that are hard for you to do are the ones that you need. All right. That is what I have down for ankle, okay? Remember, ankle is meant to be mobile. Knees are meant to be aligned and track straight. If you're going upstairs, if you're doing things and you're not strong or stable here, mobile, but you also have to be strong enough to keep the knee. If the knee is moving like this at different times, it's likely to be injured, okay? So the knee is something that's like the scapegoat between the two. If you have a problem with your knee not tracking properly, we are going to want to work on either the hip or the ankle, but the knee is more like just seeing what it does. Okay, the hips, okay? Ooh, I'm not gonna get through everything today. Amy, do you have a couple minutes more if I went a little bit beyond today?
Oh, take as much time as you'd like.
Okay. I do have a 10 o'clock client, but okay. So when it comes to the hips though, okay, I have a whole class on looking at mobility versus stability for the hips. And today, so I'm not going to go a lot into that, but a lot of times, if you notice the knees are having a problem or you have trouble stabilizing, or especially if you notice, like when you go to want to stand, you are shifting your weight right here, okay? What we want to do is either strengthen the hip and or if you aren't mobile enough, which might look at like a number 4 stretch or something like this, okay? How well can your hips go this way or this way, okay? Then we might want to work on mobility. But a lot of times people overuse their back when they're walking because they're underusing their quads and the front, okay? So one exercise that can be really helpful is a standing quad stretch. Now, this might not be the right height, but for the standing quad stretch, you would keep your hips level. You're gonna put your foot up on something, okay? And I am going to, yeah, this is not quite high enough for me. This isn't gonna be quite perfect. But I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna press down, okay, I'm gonna feel a stretch in my quad, and then I'm gonna tuck my bottom, okay? I'm gonna tuck my bottom in a pelvic tilt, and that's going to, so I'm here, I'm feeling a stretch in my quads, but then I'm going to tuck into a posterior tilt, and I'm gonna feel more of a quad stretch, okay? So this is going to help lengthen your quads, allow you to use your quads a little bit more in walking versus the low back, okay? Hamstring stretch, lots of different ones, but in theory, we want to be able to activate. A lot of times having a longer quad will actually allow us to activate into our hamstrings better. So multiple different ways of stretching into the hamstring, but of course, this is one way, and you can see I'm tight. When I come like this, it takes part of the pressure out, okay? But I stretch into my hamstrings, and if you do not have a hip replacement issue, you can stretch into your IT band as well. So you could stretch like this, or you could bend the knee like this and get a little bit of a stretch, and you're going to stretch a little bit into your side body. All right. Okay, knee drops and Diva poses. So if you want to do some exercises that are less strengthening and more mobility at the hip, and this doesn't cause discomfort either into your hips or to your into your hips or your back. Knee drops, which look like this. So I'm lying on the ground. I have my feet here, okay? I'm going to let my knees drop to one side. And then they're going to drop to the other side. Okay? You can see that I'm rolling. It's not about rolling my ankle. My ankle is staying straight. I'm rolling onto the sides of my feet. And I'm rolling onto the sides of my feet. All right, another one that can be very good is the Diva Poses. Now, essentially, I'm going to have, you can see that this leg is bent in internal rotation, this one's bent in external rotation. So I have it stretched here. We ideally want to have both hip bones touching the ground, but that's not always going to be the case. And right now my back is rounded. So I want to straighten up my back by just pressing into the ground to sit myself up a little easier. Now, a lot of people have a lot of problems with this one. I am not particularly someone who does, but let's check the other side because I have more issues with this hip. All right, so this one I'm not quite reaching the ground. I'm going to sit myself up, but I'd probably spend a minute or two here to get this to open up a little bit more. And this is going to allow a little bit more mobility at the hip. Okay, so glutes and pelvis. Theoretically, most people sometimes have a hard time connecting with their pelvis in flexion and extension. So when I say pelvis, pelvis is this region right here. It's your sacrum and your iliums, okay? So what I'm really looking for is flexion and extension of the pelvis, okay? So you could do it either on the ground or even better, you could do it on a foam roller, okay? So I have a foam roller and you can do a half foam roller as well. We're gonna come over onto the foam roller. I'm gonna put it towards my tailbone. I'm going to lie on it and I'm going to allow for a stretch in my arms. Okay, so initially I'm just going to allow the stretch to happen. I'm going to have a little bit of space in my back. That's going to release. But now I want to use just my muscles to allow my sacrum to flatten and my sacrum to lift up. So I am using the muscles of my back and my hip flexors. I'm not pressing into the ground to get the movement. And it can be really good to kind of have to stabilize at your core on the ball to keep from falling off, while I'm also working on flexion and extension into my sacrum. This is great for just about everyone. Almost everyone has a better either inflection or extension, but a lot of people don't really, we tend to get really dominant in our upper body and not as dominant from our pelvis. And our pelvis is our center of gravity. It's where most of our movement is supposed to originate from. In today's society, we tend to get a little bit stuck in our low back and really overuse our upper back in a flexion position. Now, when it comes to the glutes and pelvis, I really like inline gluteal contractions. So lots of different ways of doing gluteal exercises, but when we walk and we're moving forward, we're supposed to be propelled forward with our back line, which is our muscles from the bottom of our feet, up our hamstrings, up our glutes, up our body, but primarily our biggest muscle on the backside, which is the glute, okay? So the propelling forward is each supposed to be a contraction of the glute that is pushing us forward. So I really like the exercise, standing glute contractions, but now You don't have to have your feet on top of each other, and you can have something to hold on to, okay? But you're essentially going to have one foot in front of the other one. So yeah, make sure you're stable. Make sure you're holding on to something if you need it. And you're going to squeeze both glutes, squeeze and release, squeeze and release, squeeze and release at the same time. And then we're going to switch feet. Squeeze and release, squeeze and release, squeeze and release. Now, an easier way to do it is just to have your feet together and squeeze and release, as opposed to one in front of another. With one in front of another, I am lessening my ground force, okay? So if you're having trouble with balance, start with both feet like this and just do gluteal exercises, because my center of gravity becomes a lot smaller when I come like this, okay? And or have something to hold on to, because safety and stability is the #1 thing that we do, okay? Another exercise we could have if we wanted to, if we're a dominant person that is walking around shifted forward a little bit like this, and or we're really dominant in our upper body, is to come up here, okay? Put our elbows up here, and then do this. This is actually a little tricky because I'm not able to compensate. But this is a great exercise. Advanced, advanced, advanced. Okay, neck and shoulders. A lot of people, so in posture, we want to be stacked up on top of each other. And that includes how our upper body is and our neck is, okay? Are we walking shifted forward like this with our upper body forward like this and our head forward? A lot of times also our eyes will be looking at the ground. We will talk about eyes next time, okay? But we want to be stacked upright. We want to be moving forward from our glutes, okay? Sometimes we are really stuck in a forward flexion position with our upper back, and that makes it hard to be upright and have our neck neutral, okay? There is an exercise called static extension position that is very helpful at changing the position of your upper back and making your neck neutral at the same time. So you can start by getting on all fours, okay? Our elbows are over our shoulders, our knees are over our hips, but then we're gonna move 6 inches forward. And now we're gonna shift over our wrists over our shoulders, but now our knees, our hips are forward of my hips, okay? I have straight hands, but I'm going to allow my back to curve in. I'm gonna sink between my shoulder blades. So now I have a really like rounded back like this. And I'm sinking between my shoulder blades, but then I'm going to let my neck come into flexion, okay? So I'm gonna stay here for like a minute or two. And one of the things this is gonna do is it's gonna help release the neck from being stuck with that tight upper back. And it's going to remind the hips to start moving and that upper back to release. All right, so that is many different exercises, but one of the other things that can help separate the flexion of the shoulders from that upper back is any of the exercises where we kind of work on elbow curls back. So multiple different ways we can do that, including when we're already doing our glute exercises or single glute exercises, but that's very advanced, okay? Let's keep a stable ground where we have enough of a base, okay? And I'm gonna do glute exercises, which remind me to be upright, okay? Then I'm gonna take my hands, I'm gonna bring it right here. And now I don't want to bring my hands back by hyperextending my back or opening my ribs, okay? I want to be nice and stable here, but I'm gonna look to try to open up. You can either come like this and open up, or you can just open up and create activity between there. Really easy to accomplish the move by hyperextending the back and or rib flaring, opening up the ribs, but that's not the movement we want, okay? We want our ribs to stay stable, and I want my shoulders to move back. I work all day long with my shoulders like this. It is very good for me to remind my shoulders that they are not stuck in the front of my body. All right. In our next class, I'll ask questions in just a second, and I have about 5 more minutes, but in our next class, we're gonna start working on stabilizing on one leg, the sequence of gait for the lower body, the sequence of gait for the upper body, adding in balance elements and adding uneven weight, and a little bit more about proprioception, or using those bumpy things and getting our nerves to be a little bit healthier. Any questions on today's class? I have about 5 more minutes. So I'm sure you guys will also think of questions, and you guys would have had the emailed PDF, and except for, I didn't have the dome roller Katie stretch. I will have that next time. Everything has links to different Egoscue exercises like on YouTube, which you're like, gee, what did she mean by the supine foot circles, point flexes? You can go back and look at them. Any other questions?
Where can I get one of those little green bumpy ball?
I sell them for $8.
So do I call you or send you an email, or
Yeah,
do I pick it up?
either one.
Okay.
And then you can Venmo me and I'll put it out and you can pick it up.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
If you're not on Nantucket, the green bumpy balls can be bought on rock tape.
Rock tape, like
rock
a rock, and TAPE, rock tape.
Yes, so that's the company where I get a lot of my education from, plus the different tape that I use. However, there's more than one company that has similar balls. There's not just one company that has it. The more important thing, and you could even have like
the dryer ball. Can I use a dryer ball?
Yeah. Yes. The point is going to be fast and light, okay? The texture, fast and light, okay? And or like even if you were on the grass or something that's a little bit more textured, or you had a mat, okay? Like you had a mat that, you wipe off mud to come into the house. It's got a little bit of a texture, okay? The bumpy balls, the Nerbosa mats, the Nerbosa insoles, which we'll talk a little bit about next time, they use a very particular, scientifically proven exact texture, but it's more the texture and being able to feel them than it is, in my opinion, the exact amount of bumps or whatever. And it's also about how you do it. So we're looking to stimulate the nerves on the bottom of the feet. So what we're really wanting to do is get our brain to be able to feel the feet, okay? So our brain feels the feet, but then we're going to add our muscles into it. So we get our brain to feel the feet, okay? That's going to be very, very helpful, but we're gonna do it, and then we're gonna do our different exercises where we're standing, or we're doing something where we have to stabilize, because we want our brain to be able to connect with our feet again. The more often we use that light bumpy ball and then we do stabilizing, balancing exercises, the better our brain is going to not need the bumpy ball to be able to stabilize properly. And stabilizing properly is what's going to keep us safe when we're walking on uneven ground, okay? There's also insoles that people can wear all the time that have that bumpy surface that helps us, to exercise, and there's mats with them. There's all sorts of different things, but the interesting thing is how well, once we stimulate the right nerves and then we add exercises into it, it works much better for us.